I'm going to be talking about Anthony Davis's 1997 opera, Amistad. This is an Afrological story, and I think it aligns perfectly in terms of both music and libretto with the Afro-Diasporic theme of the conference. Davis is a new member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and as well as a 2006 Guggenheim Fellow, and has won a number of other awards, and his work has appeared in many prestigious venues, nationally and internationally. As opera scholar Dr. Naomi Andre notes, Anthony Davis is one of the best-known opera composers of his generation, but also, so far, the only Afro-Diasporic opera composer to have had multiple operas commissioned and performed in major operas. His operas have been performed at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is where Amistad was premiered, and many others, but not so far at the Metropolitan Opera. Why? Asked New York Times chief critic Anthony Tomasini in 2020. Born in 1951 in Paterson, New Jersey, Anthony Davis is the son of the innovative academic literary critic Charles T. Davis, who, along with his student Henry Louis Gates, brought a new understanding of the slave narrative to literary theory. By the mid-1970s, Anthony Davis had already become an influential figure, part of the experimental improvised music scene. As a virtuoso pianist, his approach to the instrument, which is now discussed in many standard reference texts, drew not only upon traditional and experimental African-American musical sources, but also upon the Javanese gamelan, American minimalism, and the European and American avant-garde. Well, those of you who might have heard intimations of the odd meter work of people like Vijay Iyer or Anthony Milne or Steve Coleman, you wouldn't be wrong there. Anthony Davis's groundbreaking first opera, X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X from 1986, earned a Grammy nomination as well as commendation from the states of New Jersey, Michigan, and the city of New York. A New York Times article published on the occasion of the work's New York premiere tells us that among the throngs in attendance at the New York City Opera premiere was the young filmmaker Spike Lee, who became the auteur of his own filmed epic of Malcolm's life in 1992. Summing up the reception among many African Americans, one member of the audience simply told the New York Times, "I just think that I should be here. It's important." According to Naomi Andre, Davis's operas tell stories of American life encompassing multiple experiences and vantage points that center race, ethnicity, and gender. Moreover, from the very first, Davis's operas have often confronted thorny political and social issues. His third opera, Tanya, from 1992, presaged by a number of years the importance of seriously engaging issues of domestic terrorism, with its frank and audacious yet partially surrealist treatment of the history surrounding Patty Hearst and the Symbionese Liberation Army. In Wakanda's Dream from 2007, Davis crafted a unique combination of political engagement, flexible, hybrid, formal approaches to orchestral and operatic forces, and the use of advanced computer music performance technologies. His 2019 opera, The Central Park Five, about 5 African-American Latino teenagers who spent 13 years in prison for a rape that they did not commit before being exonerated by DNA evidence during the Innocence Project, won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize in Music. In that light, Davis's music for Amistad and other works displays the musical cosmopolitan's incredulity, to borrow from Jean-Francois Lyotard, toward master narratives of genre that channel and police not only the practice of free expression, but also, and more ominously, the act of listening itself. One effect of Davis's genre refusal is to expand the purview of classical music, among other genres, past the above-the-fray individualism toward a decolonization of art music, to use composer theorist Michael Dessin's memorable phrase, that can freely eschew notions of absolute music toward the embrace of ideals of social justice, collaboration, and real-time creativity. Jointly commissioned by the Lyric Opera of Chicago and the American Music Theater Festival of Philadelphia, the world premiere of Amistad in Chicago on November 29, 1997, which I attended, was something of a media event, with featured segments on, of all things, National Public Radio's then widely heard Morning Edition with Bob Edwards and Charles Osgood's CBS Sunday Morning. Very unusual for a classical music opera of this kind, a contemporary music work. A 2-hour-long opera in 2 acts with full orchestra, double chorus, and an integrated jazz ensemble with trap drums that drove its motoric rhythmic flow, the work broke any number of molds. Amistad is resolutely postmodernist, not only in its compositional idiom, but also in the manner of its production. The African-American director of Amistad, George C. Wolfe, was well known at the time for his successful Broadway productions, including Jelly's Last Jam, about the life of the early jazz composer Jelly Roll Morton, Tony Kushner's Angels in America, for which Davis received a Drama Desk nomination for his incidental music, and the spectacularly successful extravaganza, Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk. It was while Bring in the Funk was in full swing that Wolfe, Anthony Davis, Davis's cousin Tulani Davis, the widely read novelist, poet, and opinion columnist, and the diversely talented conductor and pianist Dennis Russell Davies, began the final stages of bringing Davis's Amistad to its 1997 premiere in Chicago. As Davis explained in the composer's note in the published libretto, Amistad is an opera that was 10 years in the making. Tulani Davis and I first discussed the idea of creating an opera on the Amistad Rebellion in 1986, after the premiere of X. We were drawn to the drama of the story, a successful uprising of captives on a slave ship, and the implications of the Amistad incident, and an understanding of ourselves and the American experience. Through the Amistad, we could revisit the story of the Middle Passage, the contradictions implicit in the ethos of America, and also explore the emergence of the African American as a cultural entity. And I'd like you to note here that one reason that drew them to the story was that the captives win. They don't get destroyed, as we saw in a number of operas about African Americans. They win. And that's one reason why they were attracted to it. Musicologist Jane Isabel Forner sees Davis's work as part of what she calls, quoting here, a pattern of new opera turning to distant pasts inflected by the politics of the present, as opening a crucial space for cross-cultural operatic experimentation. Thus, the retelling of the story of the slave ship Amistad, the staging ground for a 1839 slave revolt that exercised international consequences during its era, well, it was bound to be controversial even in the late 1990s, given the persistent reluctance of the American national imagination to come to terms with the full implications of slavery. The Canadian opera Beatrice Chansey from 1998, composed by James Rolfe with libretto and book by the Afro-Canadian writer and theorist George Eliot Clarke, also explored this distant past in decidedly transgressive terms. Set in the British colony of Nova Scotia in 1801, Beatrice Chansey is a fictional slave narrative that traces the transformation of Beatrice, a slave, from girlhood to womanhood, a life marked by sexual jealousy and violation by her father, who was also her owner, violent revolution, and her eventual execution. The Canadian musicologist Donna Zapp sees this work as, quote, relevant to Canadian social issues and debates concerning race and racism and the formation of Canadian history in the public imagination. In Beatrice Chansey, Rolfe and Clarke create further critical distance from Eurocentrism. Rolfe explores musical difference as fluid relationship rather than as static essence. This scene portrays, up to a point, the rape of Beatrice by her owner father.
Yet you must obey me.
Yes, but never to sin.
To kiss your father's no sin.
On the cheek, no.
On the lips, tear.
When I was a girl, I'd do so. Now I've grown a woman, I shan't.
A Christian kiss is all I ask, to prove that, though you've asked Wentworth to raise soldiers to lock me up, you love me, Beatrice, as you claim.
Forgive me, Father. Father, forgive me. I know not your meaning.
I saw you crushing plump raspberries against your lips, jewels splashing red against your creamy skin. Desire, 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 desire cuts me to the bone. I still bleed. You hurt me more. The fiery scent of your virtue, wafting from your breasts and hair, it inflames me, it burns my eyes, it inflames me, it burns my eyes.
If I hurt thee, pluck it out, lest your body burn in judgment.
Beatrice,
Lest your body burn.
you will lead me to heaven.
What have I done to you?
As the historian Herbert Optaker showed in the 1940s, slave revolts were frequent, contrary to the accepted wisdom of the period that tended to erase the phenomenon as inconsistent with the professed nature of enslaved Africans as docile and accepting of their supposedly biblically ordained fate. In fact, those who did not accept their fate were diagnosed as suffering from a disease known as drapetomania, which was defined as the desire for freedom, irrational desire for freedom. Optaker and generations of subsequent historians have revised this conventional wisdom to show that the theory of the docile African was aimed not at history, but at the present, as with the Confederate monuments, for example, designed to influence the now ostensibly free descendants of these slaves and their fellow citizens. These defendants of these slaves were in the process of searching for justice, and to suppress any precedent for resistance was a prime goal of this erasure of memory. The Amistad, Spanish for friendship, was a 19th century schooner owned by a Spaniard living in Cuba. It became renowned for the slave revolt by Mende captives who had been captured by Portuguese slave hunters in Sierra Leone in violation of all extant treaties. They were being brought to Cuba. A Mende man known as Joseph Chinque unshackled himself and freed the others. The captors took over the ship and demanded to be taken back to Africa, but the crew instead deceived the captives and sailed north up the east coast of the United States, thinking that the ship would be intercepted and its erstwhile cargo returned to Cuba as slaves. A U.S. ship seized the Amistad off Montauk Point in Long Island, New York, and Cinque and his group were incarcerated on charges of murder and piracy. Spain requested that the president, Martin Van Buren, return the captives to Cuba under international treaty. The case gained international attention as a symbol of the movement to abolish slavery in the United States. Eventually, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in favor of the Mende, restoring their freedom. The captives were ruled to have acted as free men who were entitled to take whatever legal measures necessary to include their freedom, including the use of force. In 1842, those who wanted to return to Africa were repatriated to Sierra Leone. In many ways, Amistad revisits aspects of X and Tanya. Of course, the character Cinque is also the same character who is the leader of the Symbionese Liberation Army. But this goes in a form in Amistad that exhibits maximum focus and a tightened compositional practice. Practically absent are the long improvisations that marked X a decade earlier, replaced by a single-mindedness that affirms the centrality of the composer, even as the opera itself expresses the multi-voice nature of the decolonial. Amistad's compositional signature features constant motion and kaleidoscopic permutation. Motives appear and reappear, including a four-note ending cadence that you're all going to get used to, that appears constantly, but in ever-shifting guises. Palindromes, sudden inversions, laminar displacements abound. The musical structure seems to refuse any notion of rest, thereby mirroring the uncertainty of the opera's central African characters, who are, in the last analysis, men without a country, even though they eventually prove to be free under the laws of the United States, the majority of whose black inhabitants have no such freedom. As a performer, Davis's ear for greatness in performance is astute, and he tends to return to the same figures in an active approach to casting. The trickster figure, so eloquently theorized by Henry Louis Gates in his classic of African American literary criticism, The Signifying Monkey, A Theory of African American Literary Criticism, becomes embodied in the multiple vocal personae of tenor Thomas Young. In X, Young performs a dual role, which in the story by Tulani Davis and Christopher Davis, Anthony Davis's brother, embodies the double-facedness, that was once called Janus-like, of the Yoruba trickster god Eshu-Elegba. And he also plays the radical evangelist Elijah Muhammad, draft resistor and founder of the Nation of Islam, and Street, the blustering and yet melancholy hustler. Here, Young shows us how the young Malcolm is introduced to the Black Underground's version of an endless Walpurgis Nacht.
Shoot your shot, just forget your job, play the dice that you've got. Shoot your shot, just forget your job, play the dice that you've got. Shoot your shot, just forget your job, play the dice that you've got. Shoot your shot, come up top, admit your 2 bits are mine. You'll be owing me next week's pay before you get out from behind. Hey there, take a look, it's a country boy up from the farm. I once had that look before, but now when their work is done, they all come to me. They all come to me. They all come to see. They all come to see, all come to me. Yeah, they all come to see. They all come to me. They all come to see, all come to me.
Stay away from trouble, the users and the fools.
like this green felt table. You got broke or win if you're good and able. Shoot your shot or give me the dough. You ain't got a lot from the white man to blow. Just play the game. Don't fool with a job. A job is a slave. It will leave you wrong.
In Amistad, Act 1, Scene 1, Cloth for the Dead, Thomas Young again takes on the trickster's role, this time by combining Eshualegba with the image of the Greek blind seer Tiresias. Attending opening night, I was struck by Young's unique ability to sing seemingly impossibly difficult passages, obviously written expressly for him, improvised scat singing, while climbing well above the audience through the constructed riggings of an on-stage ship. So look at this. The Spanish schooner Amistad out of Cuba, this is from the libretto, drifts off Long Island. The ghost ship is legendary, taken over by slaves, haunting eastern waters. Aboard ship is one who shapes their fate, a ragged, boastful African deity. The trickster god Eshu, who is also, by the way, featured in Henry Louis Gates' signifying monkey, is the spirit of rebellion, uncertainty, and mischief. He is the god of the crossroads, mediating the human and the divine, and when humans meet him, they're apt to lose their way. Yet, ironically, he holds the key to their survival. But this trickster has been led astray himself, and the tortuous Middle Passage journey has nearly blinded him and weakened his powers. Those who do not know of his existence cannot see him unless he adopts the image of a human in their midst.
I am the dancer of all dancers, like a thief and lover, the one who eats when the forest hungers. When a mortal says there's a bird on the wing, they say a prayer to me. When a mortal says there's a bird on the wing, it's finally God comes to sing. I am the dancer of all dancers, I a thief and lover, the one who eats when the forest hungers. It is only a slight mishap. My sight's a little dazed. It is only a momentary lapse. My powers retire, but I do not fail. These are the trials a hero must suffer to make his story born. Among gods it's true, if you live a human life, don't forget what a god knows. If you live a human life, you'll regret it like they do. Speaking sorrow, singing blue.
In Act 1, Scene 4, the ankle and wrist section, the blues and the sorrow song are used to underscore the horrors of captivity.
fading daylight, the uploading yet still. There is only the catcher's net, the past is a fading daylight, the uploading yet still. There is only the catcher's net. Never slowly then tight.
After this, we experienced one of the moments of pointed satire in Amistad.
I think that something that's opera is lost a lot of, and particularly in modern opera, that we're too worried about being serious and we can't be funny.
Right at the next scene, Cinque is paraded before a group of white phrenologists in early pursuit of the pseudoscience of eugenics. In a depiction of media obsession with the magnification of trivia and the practice of misdirection that seems to recall our own day.
What parts?
Parts of the brain.
And so,
The one animal propensity.
Aha!
Dominate.
What's that?
He's not that bad.
Whoa!
The cerebral organization is superior.
Superior! You don't mean that!
Superior to most Negroes here.
Oh, good!
In fact, he is rather well balanced,
What did he say?
better developed than most persons,
What's that?
than those belonging to his race.
What? He's a black pirate or killer?
His brain is good all the same.
What's that he said?
The cerebral organization.
What's that he said?
The cerebral organization.
What did you say?
The cerebral organization.
How do you spell cerebral?
An important part of every Davis opera involves a hard, socially committed look at race. Indeed, the contemporaneous reception of Amistad emphasized, either positively or negatively, the connection with contemporary American dislocations of race. For the African American community of Chicago, in which I was born and raised, the reception of Amistad recalled New York's reception of X, that is, a story waiting and suppressed to be told, suppressed and waiting to be told, albeit in a medium still somewhat distant, supposedly, from the center of black culture. As the CBS show noted, the opening of the opera inspired Amistad-related events all over Chicago, just as Davis put it, with the miraculous support of the Lyric Opera of Chicago, a slave ship arrived on the shores of Lake Michigan. Of course, not everyone saw this as a miracle in the making. One critic expressed a frequently encountered view to the effect that, quote, the premiere of Amistad was a politically correct event. All the performances were sold out in advance. Over 50 critics from around the world traveled to pay their respects. Well, the fact that the work received such international attention would be considered a major feather in the cap, until, that is, we venture through the funhouse looking glass of race. An insider's tour from the other side of the looking glass was provided by the pounding that the opera took from a WWF-like tag team comprised of the Chicago Tribune's longtime and now recently retired music critic John Von Rhine and the famous television critic Gene Siskel, who compared the opera with Steven Spielberg's film version of Amistad to the distinct disadvantage of the former. Von Rhine says, well, it's almost unavoidable that they are going to use the film as a cudgel to beat the opera. It's an unfair fight because the emotional power of Spielberg's picture makes it so compelling. But even if we didn't have Amistad, the film to compare it with, the opera would remain inherently weak. Gene Siskel, well, how hard is it to compose an ominous anthem for the ocean journey that opens the story? When the lyrics Amistad failed that test, I knew I was in for a long night. In its own way, Von Rhine said, composer John Williams' score for the Spielberg film succeeds much better because it functions at the level of popular entertainment, not high art. Siskel responds, here's where I believe an opera is at a generic disadvantage to a film of this story. It's a whole lot tougher to sing a legal argument than to state one. Just imagine Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden singing their closing argument in the O.J. Simpson trial. Von Rhine responds, it's strange that an opera that features murder, revolt, human rights issues, and a sensational courtroom trial should inspire so little passion in the audience. The review, I'm breaking in here, the review exemplified what I have identified as three consistent tropes in the reception of Afro-Diasporic classical music, that its composers, librettists, and directors and performers are, first, out of their place, second, out of their depth, and third, perhaps, out of their minds. And of course, the opinions of the two reviewers have absolutely nothing to do with race or their own experiences as autonomous objective perceivers unmarked by the regime of whiteness. Gene Siskel asks, did you feel any pressure to tread lightly on the opera because of its racial subject matter and because it was a locally produced world premiere? Not at all, Von Rhine said. A music critic could only deal with the musical work itself and how it is realized, no matter how good and noble the intentions might be. In contrast to this view by the two white guys, one new black opera goer happened to be a member of what he formed his own Amistad Committee, a group that took its name from the original 1839 Committee of Citizens, including the abolitionist Lewis Tappan, who was in fact one of the characters in the opera, and who organized the defense of Cinque and his comrades. As this passionate listener put it, I was taught African American history in a fashion that I've labeled the peanut butter way of teaching history. I was taught early on that George Washington Carver worked with peanuts, had peanut oil, and peanut butter. And that was it. That finished my education of the contributions that the abolitionists and the African Americans made to U.S. history. For this new black opera goer, the Davis Opera made it clear that we have the responsibility of bringing this story to our young people to inspire them, to show them what can happen when black and white come together in common cause. Part of that responsibility is taken up by Amistad in facing the horrors of the Middle Passage. In a major aria in Act 2, Scene 7, the goddess of the waters, invoked by the captives, recalls this horrific, seemingly eternal recurrence.
Lead them to the fire first. Lead them to the fire first. When they come to me, the fire is still inside them. When they come with me, lead them to the fire first. See them from them.
Yet another critic objected to what he saw as the demonization of whites, calling the work a cardboard cutout morality sermon that failed to show the United States behaving with wisdom and compassion toward the helpless and downtrodden. Well, if nothing else, this view indicates that its writer did not manage to stay till the end of the opera to hear one of the most moving passages of the entire work, the delivery of the U.S. Supreme Court's verdict freeing the Amistad's captives, rendered by a bass baritone playing the American icon and former U.S. President John Quincy Adams, and backed by dramatic stentorian brass in the finest Copelandian tradition, from which, as it happens, John Williams also borrowed in his concluding elegy backing Richard Nixon's farewell speech in the Oliver Stone film. Thulani Davis's astonishing libretto condenses hundreds of pages of trial transcripts to the crucial lines.
Here our laws permits bondage, even a beastly vengeance within our shores. But now with men taken hostage, we seek to deny the nature's law. This cannot stand. This cannot stand. This cannot stand in our land. Slaving men, then we must not make slaves of free men. Such a outrage puts us all in bondage. Hear me well, our ruling is very plain. It has not been shown that these men were slaves. We shall not use the government to take people who are free and reduce them to slavery. They are free by our laws. They are free by our laws. They are free by our laws. We hold them no further.
One irony is that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at this time was Roger B. Taney, who some of you may recognize that name, the Maryland-born scion of a wealthy slave-owning family. Taney wrote the majority opinion in the notorious 1856 Dred Scott versus Sanford case, declaring that slaves could not be United States citizens even if they had been born in the United States. The very first sentence of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1868, was intended to explicitly overrule the Dred Scott decision. Afrological creative expression so often advances an alternative to this above-the-fray individualism I discussed earlier. As with the products of Black classical composers more generally, Davis, like Julius Eastman, places Blackness squarely on the table in the middle of the classical music table, combining its associated art world tropes with vernacular and contemporary ideals of social justice. Or, as the trickster puts it in the very first scene, what they call tragedy, I will make my history.
What they call tragedy, I will make my history. I will make my story to be told of genius born of necessity, of courage coming easy when the heart is
Well, as I come to the conclusion of my talk, I think this passage we're about to hear seems to affirm that one attraction that the Amistad story held for the composer, Anthony Davis, and the librettist, Thulani Davis, was the optimistic perception that America, despite all its faults, continues to be the best hope for a freedom marked by justice. As Thulani Davis put it to an interviewer, I think coming through the 70s to the early 80s, we were looking for stories that showed the victory of a kind of justice that we continue to struggle with in this country. Like, can anyone, get justice in this country? And as if in corroboration, Davis brings us the trickster, standing at the crossroads of a new future, deciding to make his way in a wild new Afro-Diaspora at the close of the opera.
I will take my leave of you, evaporate like ether. Yes, you have suffered enough. You must return to Africa. I have seen the gods of the new world beleaguered and in despair. I need to spark them up a bit with some wild dance and find
Okay, thank you very much. I'm told we might have a few minutes for questions. I'm not really sure. Sure, I don't know where to take the questions. I don't see anything here, but you'll tell me what to do there. So let's see, there we go. I'll just, let's see, yeah. So it says only hosts and panelists can see these questions. Okay, I see the first question from Dr. Andre. Have Davis's operas had any influence on your approach to opera? Well, sure. Sure, but I mean, the thing about Anthony's operas is that, I'll tell you a story about, John Cage tells a story where he told Arnold Schoenberg that, Arnold Schoenberg was his teacher, and Schoenberg told Cage that he had no feeling for harmony. That's what I feel like when I listen to Anthony's operas. You know, melody, not really my thing, not like him. So my influence is actually more of like, what is it, the Bloomian anxiety of influence, where I have to find my own way, and it took me an awfully long time to do it, and, you know, and the score is like, at this point, like 9-1 or something in terms of operas. So look, I played with Davis since 1973, when we were all at Yale together. Skip Gates, me, Davis, you know, others. You know, so sure, I've been influenced by that. Yeah, we are doing really different things. That's true. I mean, that's by design, of course, but also by personality, you know. Let's see, are there any other questions? I'm getting them now. Let's see, all right. I don't see anything else so far. Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know what to say about Anthony Davis. I mean, I've always loved this opera. I've listened to it many, many times, and it, you know, there's the minimalism. I mean, if you listen to it, the same elements recur. As you can tell, he doesn't bother with what my old mentor David Behrman called the cheap trick of transposition. He doesn't deal with that at all. In other words, we have to kind of find another way to achieve variety and interest. And he seems to do that through the orchestration. And Tulani Davis's libretto is just, you know, it's magnificent. I mean, it's genius level stuff. So, 2 questions. Stephen Jaffe says, I heard the blues in Ankle and Wrist. Yes, indeed. Oh, I don't know what sorrow song was being invoked. I mean, but the idea of them was clearly present, you know, as far as I can see. And how do I feel about the projection of subtitles in vivo? Well, when I did my first opera, we had dual subtitles in Czech and English, or super titles or whatever they called. And I learned, because I had to make the super titles myself. They have software for that where you can make the super titles in PowerPoint. So I learned a lot about that kind of thing. So I'm actually all for super titles or any other means. Intermedia, it's all a part of the same stream. Okay, let's see. Here's someone who says, can you talk about Davis's influence as you received it among other contemporary black opera composers? You know, I really can't. I mean, that's something that, you know, I try not to get into questions of influence like that. You know, I mean, I hear all kinds of things. Anthony's influence. For example, I know that, you know, Anthony really liked Mingus. And so we do hear some of that. And he liked a lot of other things. So, but in terms of the influence, maybe that's a story that needs to be examined. I've seen very little written about this work of a scholarly nature. I mean, I took this talk from the liner notes I wrote for Amistad, which were published with the CD. So there's a lot more to be said. And that's a great question, but I'm not really able to answer it in the way you might like. Here's one about, let's see, the issue of white critics and their blatant racism is such a relevant issue. How to encourage having more black opera critics in high places like the New York Times to combat this racism? Well, you know, sure, we do need people to write, but you know, opera critics, I'll put it this way. I read that interview I read that Zine Siskel thing in 1997. I just published my first scholarly article. So that stuck in my craw until 2021. So I sort of said, well, let me comment on that now. And that's the thing about being a musicologist. It's all grist for the mill, and they're going to get theirs eventually. Now, in the meantime, it would be nice to see a black opera critic. We know at least one person who could take up that position immediately. That is Dr. Andre. And there are certainly others. So I would be interested in doing that. I would be interested in seeing that. As it stands, we need more critics. Black opera critics, or anyone who understands the Afro-Diasporic and can speak to its importance and can speak to the creolization, as I see it, of classical music. Let's see what else we have here. Oh yeah, look at this. We look forward to bringing Davis's X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, back to life in Detroit and Omaha. Interesting to see how that lands today. Well, I think it's going to land in a great way. I mean, they certainly did take a long time about getting it back onto the screen. So we've had a sort of a changing of the guard. There's a new community of people who seem to understand more about what's at stake. So I'm very grateful for that. You know, U.B. Blake had to wait until his 90s to get recognized. So maybe, you know, maybe there's a chance for us. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Opera has a race issue without taking any responsibility for their part in that situation. Well, yes, that's all I can really say about that. You know, all those articles, you know, talking about Trump supporters. I mean, the guy's out of office and they're still doing it. Oh, someone said it's Ion's birthday. Did you broadcast that to everyone? I don't want to sing happy birthday, but I would like to wish her a happy birthday. That's fantastic news. Wow. Let's have many more birthdays. Let's see. In the sense of opening up a sense of possibility for what can happen on the landscape. Yes, certainly we do want to open up that space, and that's what we're doing right now as a part of this conference, and that's what a number of people are trying to do. And we have to be aware of how to open up those spaces. And there's a certain technology about it that one has to develop those possibilities. And I mean, I think scholarship is extremely important in doing this. And we need like, I mean, Naomi's 2 books, for example, and the articles she's written are prime material for the scholars of the future. We need more people like this. So is it time? Is it time for the next person? We should wrap it up, or do we have more time? I don't see anybody telling me anything. Oh, do I have time for this one? I'd love to hear how Anthony incorporates the personal instrumental vocabularies of certain longtime collaborators like J.D. Perrin and Jerry Hemingway, and how they're integrated into the orchestra. Well, it's very interesting because X was performed by Faroon Aklaf, who, if you were there for the first part of the talk, played in the hemisphere, not hemispheres, and he played in the other piece, the Episteme. Jerry Hemingway, similarly, Jerry Hemingway lived in New Haven and grew up there. He wasn't a Yale student, but we played with him too. And so a lot of it is based on long-time familiarity and collegial opportunity. People like J.D. Perrin, who he wrote the concerto. You Have the Right to Remain Silent, or me. He wrote stuff for me too. So I mean, back when I was practicing trombone and stuff like that. So yeah, because if you didn't practice, you couldn't make it. So I don't know. It comes down to the thing is, in introducing these people into the classical orchestra, you've got people who are basically code switchers. Like JD has a classical formation. He worked in music education. He also has a jazz formation, and so he can code switch. And that provides a certain kind of security on both sides of the classical jazz aisle. And the thing is, that aisle is increasingly narrow and people step over it all the time now. But certainly in the 80s, that was an aisle which it seemed like an unbridgeable gulf. And so people like Jerry and Ferrone, Rick Rossi, Shem Gaboury, and others, he wrote pieces expressly for them that would incorporate their personal vocabularies, but they could also be performed by other people. So he was looking, it wasn't like writing for someone and then they go away for some reason, and then the piece dies. The whole point of us trying to work together was to produce Davis's music in a way that it could live, forever. Okay, so I guess I have to stop now, they say. So thank you all very much. And thanks to Calvert Nelson in particular. Wherever you are, you can let me know or send me a direct message. I'm in Berlin for another month. Okay? I'll see everybody later. I guess I should sign off now. Bye-bye.